Hey guys, how's it going? Well, I thought tonight we would talk about my 1987 Olds Custom Cruiser that I had for a few years. And the standard advice about this is on a computer monitor, may be kind of difficult to see or blurry, applies here as well, because we're looking through the camera at the computer monitor, so it sort of pixelates a little bit. But anyway, that's this car you see here. It's the 87 Olds Custom Cruiser. And this predated YouTube by a few years. I think I got this in February of 2008, somewhere around there. And this was another one with an interesting story about how I got it. This was I was going to say YouTube. This was an eBay purchase. I was on eBay one night, and you know what happens when you get on eBay. And I was looking in the salvage parts card category, which used to be chock full of stuff like this until they started getting strict about it, and it got harder to sell stuff like this, which actually was good, you know, good cars that ran, but people didn't want to pay the listing fee for it in the regular category. So anyway, I watched this thing, and it was like I think it started out like 500 bucks, and I watched it the whole week. And I'm one of these that I don't start bidding on something to the last minute if I think I'm going to be able to get it and afford it. I kind of stalk the bid and then swoop in. So anyway, I watched this thing and watched it, and it had no bids. And so at the last minute, I put in a bid of like $600, I think it was, something like that, or $650, and walked away from the computer because I can't ever sit there and watch the countdown. I always have to leave and then come back, because I'd rather get the bad news later if I don't win something. Well, I checked my email. I had won this car, so that was the good news. The bad news was this car didn't run, and it was located in Morgantown, West Virginia, which is about 8 or 9 hours from here. So, okay. So I went ahead and paid the deposit, and you know, I had to pick it up within a week, so this was on the weekend, so I made quick plans to go up there in a car and take some parts with me and try to fix this car and get it running and drive it back home. Now, would I do that now? I don't know. But I grabbed my cohort, you know who, Uncle Phil. You know, if I was going to do something crazy like that to go badly, I need to have somebody else involved with me, of course. So got Uncle Phil, and Uncle Phil was up for a trip. So at that time, I was driving, in 2008, I was driving, my daily car was a 2002 Pontiac Bonneville SE, which I thought about highly enough as the rest of the GM front-wheel drive cars I've had like that, which wasn't too great. But it ran good, and it was a decent car. So this was February, so it was cold, and so we got our stuff together, which consisted of a jack, hand tools, and the guy said that the car had just quit running in the road, kind of where it was sitting at. It was sitting in a little lot somewhere fenced in there in town, and he said the elderly owner was driving it and it just quit running, and that's where it ended up at, and she decided to sell it. She didn't want to fool with it anymore, and they thought it needed a carburetor, and they tried to fix it and just couldn't get it to run right. It ran, just didn't run well. So we took a carburetor. I had rebuilt a computer controlled Olds carburetor, Quadrajet, for it sometime back, not for it, but for another car I had to use that same engine, which was a 307 Olds. So we took that, hand tools, jack, coats, blanket, money, and that's about it. So we lit out and we went up on, we went to Chattanooga, and we picked up 75 North. We took it to Knoxville. We got on 81 East, I think it is, out of, eventually 40 runs into 81 out there somewhere. And then we picked up Interstate 77 North. We went through the tunnels and followed it up north, and somewhere around Beckley, West Virginia, we cut across on US 19 over to Morgantown. So we got to Morgantown the same day. We got there kind of late, about 9 p.m. I guess it was. So we met the guy the next day, and it was cold up there, but it was not raining at least, or snowing. So we went and met him where this car was, and it's just a really clean custom cruiser. Didn't have a whole lot of miles on it. It had like 80,000, 90,000 miles on it. Just as you see it. The only bad part about it was you can't see from this side was that something had got the right hand front door on it. So it had a big dent in the right front door, but that was the only real problem it had. Nice clean car. Did not have hardly any rust problems anywhere. Nothing underneath it, you know, even from being up there. At that time it had white leather tires on it. I added those white wall tires later, and I think it greatly improved the looks of it. Immaculate interior. So we showed up there, and I paid the guy for the car, you know. I mean, I had to buy it, as you can't back out on an eBay purchase, you know. So he's a real friendly guy, and he didn't have much to offer. I guess he just bought it from her or whatever, and they tried to get it going. It just wouldn't run right. So we threw that carburetor on and put a battery in it. I think the battery was in it. I think the battery was okay. So we hooked it all up, and I'd been in those engines many times, so I could do that pretty quick, and put the fuel line back together. Checked it over, had oil, had water, antifreeze, everything looked good on it, belts were good. Nothing bad, nothing looked bad on it, you know, nothing, no smoking gun. So we get in there and we start it up. The thing starts right up and runs great, you know. And first thing you notice is it's kind of loud. Somebody had been trying to, I guess they thought the converter might be stopped up, so they had loosened up one of the exhaust collectors, I guess, on one side. I think both those are on the same side on that one. So they loosened it up. It wasn't all the way off, but so it was a little bit noisy. So we, you know, it was my car, so he hung around there a little bit, and the guy sold to me. So we took off down the road down there one way, sort of out of town, and that's called Don Knotts Boulevard. I think he was born there. And we went down a mile or two, and it run good. So we flipped around and went back the other way. It was running fine. We went up to the gas station and put some gas in it, and went back to where he was. He was just standing there watching us go by like he was kind of incredulous, you know. And so we had to go get the title at his house. We followed him out to his house, and it was out in the country a little ways. So we followed him out there, no problems, you know, things running great. And the other thing I noticed at that point, though, the thing was really sluggish, man. It didn't hardly have any power. I mean, it was running okay. It just wasn't any, you know, a 307 and one of those is not very peppy anyway, but it was really underpowered. So, you know, at that point, our theory was we were just going to get this thing and get it going. And if it run okay, which it did, we were just going to get on the road back home, and we were going to go as far as we could go with it. And if it quit running, we were going to put it in a storage facility someplace, and we'd come back and get it later. So we got the title and everything done at his house, and so we said goodbye, took off, and we got on. We went back a different way. We came back on, I think that's Interstate 79, and it goes down to Charleston, picks up Interstate 64 in Charleston, West Virginia, heads over towards Lexington, and I've got family and out there outside of Lexington, so we were heading that way to spend the night. So we just got on the road, you know, and I mean, that old car was just working hard up every hill, you know, just downshifting, and almost had it on the floor, you know, a lot of the time. And I was just thinking, you know, you're on the edge of your seat anyway. You're thinking, well, you know, I don't know nothing about this car, and I thought, if this thing's going to act up, this is going to get it out of it, up and down these hills like this. I said, it's going to do something, surely. But it didn't. Man, I mean, it ran. It was slow, but it ran fine the whole way down through Charleston, over to Winchester, into the night. We stopped once for gas. It had those neat chimes on it. It had the warning light package and the gauges and all that. Any of you who've ever had those cars like that, you know what I'm talking about. It makes a real neat little sound when the gas is low or the lights are on or something like that. It would bling, bling. So it did that once, and I pulled and got gas and everything. Everything's fine, no problems. No problems at all. Just ran like a watch, just a slow one. So, you know, I just couldn't put it together. I thought, well, you know, I think, was it really just a carburetor? You know, and they couldn't fix it. You know, so I'm just driving, you know, just thinking the other shoe's going to drop, and never did. So we're just bombing along. So we stay overnight in Winchester and all that. We leave out the next morning. This is dead cold in the morning. Starts right up. Off we go. So we hot foot it down 75 with, you know, Richmond and Berea and Corbin and Lake City and all that down there, and just fine. Went all the way to Knoxville, got gas again, Chattanooga, and then we got off the interstate down there outside Chattanooga down there on 72, which comes back towards Huntsville. At that time I was living in the other house down there. So we got back down to this little place called Scottsboro down there, and in Scottsboro you have to turn off of 72 onto this called Alabama 79, which goes back towards where I live. And where I live was about 20 miles from that area. So, you know, we've just been rolling along fine. Went all these hundreds of miles back, 75, 80 miles an hour, no problems. So we got down, we got off of 72, and we stopped there at the stoplight there at 79 where you can turn left, and I take off, and all of a sudden that son of a gun gets through the intersection and it starts jumping and running weird. That starts, it really goes, you know. I thought, oh boy, here we go. It's finally doing something wrong. And so, you know, when something like that happens, you got about three things running through your mind. You know, first of all, you think, is it going to quit right here in the middle of the street? Or number two, how am I going to keep this thing going? And number three, what's wrong with it? So I'm looking around, you know, I'm thinking, okay, why just do this now? You know, I let off the gas and straighten up. But I gave it any gas, it just wouldn't hardly run at all. Just jump and jerk, and it never quit running, but it just doing that crap. I felt like I was riding one of those mechanical bulls, man. That thing was jumping so bad, it just run and let off, run, let off, you know. So we're going along about 20 miles an hour as fast as that sucker goes. And I'm looking around at it, and I noticed one thing. I noticed the gas is down pretty low. But I didn't really think anything about that at that point. So we're going on, and this thing just runs so bad. And so finally we pull over somewhere. And I told Phil, I said, man, this thing's just running like crap. I said, it's like it's just going to quit at any minute. But it idled, you know, start right up and idle. So we let it cool off a little bit, and we pulled the gas line off and cranked it over to see if it had gas. And it appeared to be, you know, shooting gas out like it should. Didn't have a gauge or anything on those. So we had to make a decision. We thought, well, either we're going to have this thing towed in, or we're just going to try to make it. So we had about 15 miles left at that point, and we made a run for it. And the worst part of that trip was that that's a 2-lane road, and it goes across 2 of these causeways that there is no pull-off, no berm on it. So it's just the guardrails right up against the edge of this road right there, and that's how the South does their roads back then. They just, you know, too narrow. So anyway, if that thing had quit in the middle of any of those, Phil would have had to push me across with the other car. Fortunately, it didn't. I mean, like I said, about 15 or 20 miles an hour was top end. I mean, I had cars behind me. They were passing me and honking the horn, you know, and we limped that sucker home and got home with it. And I spent about a week trying to figure out what the heck was wrong with it. And it was low on gas. I'd say it had about 1/8 of a tank in it. I just didn't think anything about that. I didn't give that enough thought. So first thing I did was the wrong thing. I put a fuel pump on it, which didn't fix it. And same thing. Try to get out and drive it, wouldn't hardly run. So I'm scratching my head, and at the same time, in the process of trying to diagnose this thing, I had noticed, I put the timing light on, I noticed the reason why it was so down on power is because somebody had retarded the timing way down. So I put the timing back up where it should, and it had more power, but up to about 20 miles an hour, and that's it. It'd start trying to conk out. So, you know, I was trying to pick my brain. I was trying to think, well, why is this thing doing this? Why is it not actually quitting all the way? Why is it not just quit, not start again? Why is it doing this run and let off, run and let off, run and let off? So I'm thinking about it. So I thought, okay, what the heck? I'm going to put some gas in it. So I went and got a few gallons of gas and put in it, and it straightened up completely. It ran just like it should. I was like, aha! Now I know what's wrong with it. Know exactly what's wrong with it. So what I did was, the gas tank on those is easy to get out. It's right back there at the back on this side, I think. It's kind of a big shape. It doesn't go all the way across. It's on one side, sort of. So I dropped the gas, jacked it up, dropped the gas tank out of it, and sure enough, I pulled the sending unit and the pickup out of it, and that pickup had a little hole rusted in the steel tube about 3 inches off the bottom. So when it got that low on gas, it was sucking air into it. It wasn't enough to quit completely, but it was just not getting enough fuel to keep running right. And that had to be what was wrong with this car the whole time. They didn't know it. They didn't check it. It was running out of gas. They thought the carburetor was screwed up and whatever else, timing, you know, they just couldn't do it. So anyway, I fixed that and put the tires on it, and I had to, that car had been driven so slowly, I guess, that the throttle valve inside the transmission stuck in one position. That was another thing that was not fun about it. That thing was stuck, so it shifted at like a certain speed all the time. It didn't matter if your foot was off the gas or down on the floor. It shifted like at a predetermined spot all the time, so it was hard to get it to downshift and all that crap. It wouldn't downshift. You had to do it manually. So I did an old trick. I got out there with it running in drive, and it brake on. I think I had the front end up against something, and got the cable off the carburetor that goes to the transmission. I just went ding 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 ding, kind of looks like you're doing something else. But anyway, I worked that thing back and forth for about a minute straight, and it unstuck it, and it worked fine. And that car ran fine the whole time I had it. I kept it about 2 or 3 years, and I didn't drive it all the time. I kind of kept it as a backup. In fact, when I wrecked a car one time, I had to drive this one for about a month. But a really nice car, and I'd like to have one like it again, I guess. But it just sort of, you know, I had my fill of it. It got kind of boring after a while. It wasn't very powerful, but it was a good road car. Everything worked, air conditioning, everything. And I ended up listing it again on eBay and sold it to an optometrist that lived in St. Louis. And he flew out here and drove it back home, and he's had it ever since, as far as I know. He drives it around, he drives it to these Civil War reenactments, like at Gettysburg and places like that. So I think he had the door fixed or replaced, and that's about all he had to do to it. I think he might have had the top of the car painted too, where it was just a little bit faded up there. But that was a really nice car, and it went to a good home, and I was glad to be able to have owned it. That was a real risk that we took at that time going up there, but it was fun. It was always fun to go with Uncle Phil, and the old Olds Custom Cruiser did get us back home. A cold February trip. So that's the story of my 1987 Olds Custom Cruiser with a 307 V8, a 4-barrel carb, a 204R transmission, whatever they call that one. And yeah, it's a real nice car. I hope it's still doing well, and we'll talk to you guys again about something else interesting in the next installment of Let's Talk About. Thanks so much. Y'all have a good one. See ya.